Welcome to my top 100 board games list. I'm so glad you decided to come check this out. Just to tell you a little bit about my format for this, I did this last year, but it was all on my blog. So this time I am opening this up so that's on YouTube and people can potentially stumble across it. What I'm going to tell you is for each entry, the name of the game, how much it moved either up or down from last year's list, or if it's new, a complexity rating of 1 to 10, with 1 being the simplest possible game and 10 being the most complex, and the number of players that I would recommend playing it at, because sometimes the box lies. I will also describe each game briefly and a little bit about the reasons why it landed where it did on my list. And I'm also breaking this up so that we're doing about 10 entries each time, except for the first video, which includes an honorable mention. So we'll cover the list in about 10 videos. So let's get started. Oh, and each time we're going to do one theme for the list of 10 games that we're covering. So the theme for this list of 10 is combo-heavy gameplay. So, starting with my honorable mention for the top 100 list, just barely missing it, is Can't Stop, which is down 14 spots to its place as the 101st game on my top 100, so just barely off of it. Its weight rating is a 1, and its number of recommended players would be between 2 to 4 players. This is a really simple, accessible board game in which you are simply rolling dice, pairing them up, and then advancing on the tracks of what those add up to. So if you pair a 2 and a 5 and a 3 and a 6, you advance up the 7 and the 9, but you can only advance in a single turn up 3 different possible tracks. If you've got one up on the 7, one up on the 9, and another up on the 4, and you roll a combination of dice that cannot make even one combination that is one of those numbers, you lose all your progress that turn. So at some point you have to stop, bank your progress, and then you can start from there on a subsequent turn. But if someone gets to the top before you, they eliminate that row from being done by you at all, which means that if someone gets to the top at the 7, you can't use the 7 at all for the rest of the game. First one to the top 3 slots wins the game. 3 of the top 11 possible slots. It's very fun, it's very simple. I've played this more online than I have in person, but it works just as well either way. I would recommend this to just about anyone, but it is a little vanilla for me, which is probably why it just barely missed my list. It's still an easy recommendation, especially to people who haven't played a lot of games. It's a game that has certainly stood the test of time, as it's a lot older than a lot of the games that are on my list. So I can certainly recommend it. It's just not quite good enough to break into my top 100. Just barely making my list is my number 100 game, Dutch Blitz. I will show you the game if I happen to own it, which is not always the case this low on the list. It is ranked exactly the same spot where it was last time, where it just barely squeaked on to my top 100 last time. Its weight rating is a 1, and its number of players is either 3 or 4. Now, this game is very simple. It's one of the few games that is perhaps what could be called in the classics category of games that are played by people who just shop at like Walmart and bookstores for their board games. And despite that, it's a very effective game at simulating a sense of tension due to the fact that it's real time and you're just trying to cycle through your deck and get through as many cards as you can, but especially the cards that are on one particular pile, which will determine when the round ends. So this game can either go very long or very short. Your luck depends very much upon how you end up shuffling your own cards. It is not a perfect game. It is a fun game. It is something of a guilty pleasure. If anything belongs in this category, in that category for me, it would be this game. Would I recommend it? Not to everyone. You have to be kind of excited about the idea of playing a game where everyone's going at the same time. But if that's what you want to do, this is a very simple and accessible implementation of that, and I can recommend that if that sounds exciting. If that sounds horrible, avoid it like the plague. But it's a good game, and it deserves a place on my list, even if it apparently is the very bottom spot of my actual official 100 list. So that is my number 100, Dutch Blitz. My number 99 is the game Welcome to. It is part of the very popular genre that is sometimes called roll and writes. This one would be considered a flip and write because you don't actually roll any dice in this one, but it is the same sort of structure to the gameplay where some randomizer is done to give you some information, and then based on that information, you fill out a sheet for yourself that will determine how you score at the end of the game. Its theme is pleasant, but rather uninspiring, where it is about filling in rows of homes with numbers that have to go from lowest to highest in each row, and you get to get some bonus points depending on which number you pick and which special ability it is next to. It is a fairly simple game. It is a game that you can play with basically as many people as you can get to huddle around the table and actually physically see the cards. You just need to give out enough sheets to play it. Its flexibility is great. Its simplicity is great. I almost wonder if it's just a tad too complex to be as simple a game as you would want to play with like 15 people at a family gathering, when such things are possible anyway. But it is fun, and it is probably my favorite of this genre. It is not a genre I've gotten into particularly, but this is a pretty good entry in that genre, and if I'm going to recommend something from the flip and write / roll and write genre, it would probably be this game. So that's Welcome to. I believe you can get it in different themes, where it's Welcome to Halloween, Welcome to Your Perfect Home, various variations depending on which one you buy, but it's essentially the same game, just with different skins on how the theme plays out exactly. So that is my number 99, Welcome to. Forgot to mention, Welcome to is down 11 spots on my list. Its weight rating is a 2, and it plays from, I would say, about 1 to 20 people you could feasibly do. Alright, that's it. My number 98 is Bang the Dice Game. This is down 4 spots from my previous list. Its weight rating is about a 2, and it plays about 5 to 8 players. This is a social deduction game, which is a category of games I enjoy quite a bit, where you are either lying to other people or trying to figure out who in the group is lying to you, and you have to sort of determine, based on social cues and some hints from how the players play the game, who to trust and who not to trust. This one, the social deduction element is actually fairly limited. There are only a couple of things you're trying to figure out. Basically, you want to figure out who's the deputy and who's the renegade posing as the deputy. The other players are comparatively obvious. But there's also a Yahtzee-style rolling mechanism, which is actually kind of fun here, because some of the consequences for rolling certain things are genuinely terrible. You don't want to roll arrows, and you don't want to roll dynamite. You do want to roll beer, and you do want to roll shots. Not shots in terms of, like, you've already got beer for that, but shots as in bang, bang, bang. Anyways, so this game is quite quick. It is faster than a lot of social deduction games, which are often play in about 30 minutes. This one plays in about 15, at least if everyone is kind of keeping the game moving. You can play several rounds in a row as a result, which is great fun. There is a fairly narrow range of player count to play here. It says, I believe, 3 to 8 on the box, but realistically, you need the Renegade in the game to generate a lot of interest, and you don't get the Renegade until you have at least 5 players, so I recommend it at 5 to 8 players. It's fun. It's a game I don't own, but it's probably one I would consider picking up if I see it available, and considering it's relatively inexpensive given that it's a small box, I'll probably pick it up to sort of round out my collection of social deduction games. It might climb my list if that happens, but this is just a fun game. I would warn against playing the original, which it's based on, which is just called Bang the Dice Game, which is not a bad game, but it just goes on really, really long for what it is. I don't see any reason to ever play Bang the card game when you could play Bang the Dice Game and get a similar experience condensed into about 15 minutes for what can take well over an hour, which is quite long for a game of this type, which is what happens when you try to play the card game. So that's a recommendation. Check it out. Maybe I'll pick it up myself at some point. That's Bang the Dice Game, my number 98. My number 97 is Forbidden Stars, which is new to my list. Its weight rating is a 9, so we've jumped up in weight class, and it plays 2 to 4 players. This is the first truly heavy strategy game that is on my list, and this is actually fairly atypical for what I usually play and enjoy, in that it is a more of a straight Ameritrash slash thematic slash war kind of game, which I don't play a lot of. I do tend to enjoy them okay when I do play them. I just tend to get more excited about Euro games, which we'll be talking about a lot on this list. This is a lot of fun, despite the fact that I can pretty much guarantee when I set out to play it that I'm going to lose it, because everyone else who plays this game is a whole lot more competent at managing this type of gameplay than I am. But I like that that depth is there. I like that you can be that much better than another person at it, when a lot of games, especially light games, tend to be like you can sort of be slightly better than your opponents, but you might lose based on the luck of how the cards come out or something like that. This isn't the case here. If you are better at this game, you will win. There is dice rolling here. There is some card play here, but it is not as random as it might at first seem, and really rewards managing your resources well. So it is a game I recommend, but only to people who are prepared to play very complex games. This is only 1 point off the top of my scale, at least in my subjective ranking of weight rating. It's also quite long. Like, I don't think you could do this in under 2 hours, even if you kept it only to a 2-player count. You could easily play 3, 4, or 5 hours at this game to finish it, especially if you're playing 3 or 4 players instead of just 2. And I think you get the full experience at 2 players anyway, so if you're going to try it, you probably want to try it with one other player who knows the game, so you can ask questions and just have that 2-player experience to get a feel for it. And you will get crushed, but you can probably have a pretty good time at it. The Warhammer 40k theme doesn't do a heck of a lot for me personally, but it does suit the sort of chaotic, conflict-heavy nature of this game, and the fact that you're just going after specific places to try to get objectives. This is not a game I've played for a while. I'm not even quite sure what made me think to revive this on the list, but I couldn't keep it off my list because I think I like it too much. Despite this, again, not being my usual sort of game. It is very good. I would recommend it under certain circumstances to certain people. It's also out of print and it's hard to find, so maybe look for an alternative if you can, but I still like it, so it's on my list. That's my number 97, Forbidden Stars. My number 96 is Dominion, which is down 23 spots. Weight is about a 4, and plays 2 to 4 players, although I've mostly played this at 2. Now, I have 2 brothers who are also somewhat into board gaming as a hobby, and if this was their list, I'm not sure they would quite do 100 games like I'm doing, but they would probably both comfortably have Dominion in their top 10. In fact, I'm quite sure that one of my brothers would have this as his number 1. So I'm the smallest fan of this game out of the 3 of us, and I don't really have a great reason for why, because I did get a little tired of it, but that was before I started playing with the expansions, which they have bought, and they have basically gotten almost all of them for this game, and it does help this game immensely. I would say I would recommend this game, but you are going to get tired of it if you keep playing it, if you don't eventually branch out into some or a lot of the expansions. But the fact of the matter is that once you get there, the gameplay is pretty fantastic. Like, this is a deck building game where you start with a small deck of cards where every card in it is basically bad. You can use those cards to acquire more cards. They'll put you into your deck, and as soon as you've gone through your entire deck, you shuffle up your deck, and it becomes your draw pile again, and you start drawing cards from there. So the new cards that you just bought are going to improve your deck, and that will help you improve your deck even further, which will then help you improve your deck even further, and so on until you take a certain number of the point cards, which do nothing but clog your deck and give you points at the end of the game. If you get enough of those high ones out, that ends the game. Or if enough of the sort of main action cards in the middle of the deck are taken, that will also end the game. It's a great framework. It basically accommodates essentially a potentially limitless number of different action cards which can change the gameplay in as many ways as can be conceived by game designers, which is quite a number when you think about what's been done with something like, say, the Magic the Gathering. So this game has a lot of variety. Once you include the expansions, it can have a potentially virtually infinite number of combinations because of that. And as a result, like, there's no need for any two games of Dominion to be the same. Unless you keep teaching new people, then you probably just want to use the same 10 to 15 cards over and over again because those are the best ones to learn with. And then that kind of gets tiring. So it is kind of a problem to show this game to new players because experienced players aren't going to get a lot from trying to teach this to new players. But once the players kind of get their feet wet, you can really explode the world of Dominion in quite a number of ways. I don't have many deck builders on my list because it's not a mechanism that clicks with me when it's the only thing going on in the game. Marvel Legendary is a game that wouldn't be anywhere close to my list. Ascension is another game that wouldn't be anywhere close to my list because I'm just not that interested in them. Star Realms, another game which I actually own, not anywhere close to my list because I just think Dominion does it better than most of them. There might be one other pure deck builder coming up on here, and there'll be other games that have deck building as an element, which tends to sit better with me. But this is just really, really good. I just don't think it sits dead center on my tastes. In terms of what appeals to me personally, which is probably why it's as low as 96 on my list. But I still think it's a fantastic game, and it's an easy recommendation for people that either are new to board gaming but not new to gaming in either the video gaming realm or have played Magic the Gathering or miniature gaming and want to sort of try this particular genre of gaming. Or just people who have tried like basic gateway games like Ticket to Ride and Catan and are looking for like something that's a little bit more evolved from that, a next step to take. Works fantastic for that. Would highly recommend if that describes you at all. So that is my number 96, Dominion. My number 95 is Seasons, which is down 11 spots on my list. Its weight is about a 5, and it plays about 2 to 4 players. This is funny that it falls right next to Dominion on my list because they are, although this one isn't a deck builder, scratch a similar itch where they're very card-driven, combo-heavy games, which is also the theme for this 10. And it is very pretty, and it involves dice drafting of custom dice, and it's got a unique system of just how you pay for things and how you build on top of the cards you have, and how you set aside cards for later that you're planning to buy in the later portion of the game that you're not ready to buy in the early portion of the game. There's a lot that I like about it. I just don't know if it quite adds up to as compelling as an experience as I think it should. I still like it a lot. I mean, every game that I have on the top 100, I have rated at least an 8 out of 10, which is a game that is very, very strong in my opinion. So this is just a case of why is it great when it should be even more than that? And I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I still like it, but I could also see it going off my list if I don't get more chances to play it. I don't own this, as you can tell by the fact that I'm not physically showing you a copy. I don't know what I'm going to do if we ever get to a certain game of a certain weight, but that's for another day. It's terrific. I just don't like it as much as I think I should. So, honestly, the place it deserves on my list is probably, as a result, the bottom part of my top 100. That seems about right for this game. If I play it more, it may improve. If I could get an expansion, if I could get my friend who owns the game to get an expansion or two, that might change my mind a little bit. But for now, it's just a very solid game that I can recommend. Maybe not as a first step into board gaming, but perhaps a little bit after that. So that's my number 95, Seasons. My number 94 is Terraforming Mars, which is down 25 places. Its weight rating I would put at about an 8 and plays about 1 to 4 players. It says 5. Don't listen. Terraforming Mars is a game that I somehow, by rating it the 94th best board game in my opinion, I am vastly underrating this compared to what other people have to say. This is another combo-driven game that uses cards, and it is a game that might be best described as something like Race for the Galaxy with a board. There are combos to be built, there are resources to be managed, there are things to be pushed around, there's a planet to fill up, and in some ways it kind of can feel like a cooperative game because you are collectively working to push the oxygen level, the temperature level, and the number of oceans to a certain level, at which point the game will end. And because there's not an individual bar for each of these things, but a collective one, it can feel like a cooperative experience in that sense, but it just isn't. It's competitive. Now, this is a combo heavy game, but I find my main criticism is that it doesn't always, because there are so many different ways, so many different cards, so many different possible combinations built into the game. I can see why people like it because of that, but it can also mean that sometimes certain things just can't happen for you because the right combination of cards don't come out. The last time I played this as a solo game, and I got a corporation that was heavy on titanium production. It converted titanium into money at a better rate than any other corporation. The only problem was I got virtually no titanium cards, so I lost the game, and I wondered how much of it had to do with the fact that all the titanium cards, which I knew were in the deck, just didn't come out for me. And the fact that that can happen, and I think it's more than just a once in a blue moon coincidence when it does happen, is kind of a problem. And because of that, it doesn't sit as high on my list as some of the other similarly acclaimed strategy games might end up landing, as you will see in time. So I like the game. I think it's quite good. I just bought an expansion for it that I have yet to try, Prelude, and I'm hoping that maybe with some expansions it kind of addresses some of the problems that I have with it, but I'm not sure. It just hasn't quite clicked with me to the degree that it clicked with everyone else, and part of me wonders, like, what am I missing that everyone else seems to be seeing? So Terraforming Mars, solid game. You're probably going to like it a lot more than I do. So as long as you're not intimidated by some complexity, and I think it is more complex than people admit because there are just so many different cards and things to track, and then there's the fact that you have to manage how the cards interact with each other and how the cards interact with board and how all these pieces interlace. It is not the most complex game, but it's definitely more than I would host on a new gamer per se. So it's a very good game. Recommend it if you're up for the challenge of the complexity level. Again, I rated it a 7. It's more complex than average, but not ghastly so. So that is my number 94, Terraforming Mars. My number 93 is another strategy game, and I can say it does have some combo oriented gameplay as well, although perhaps not as heavy as Terraforming Mars. And this one is down 1 spot, so virtually in the same place. Its weight is also 7 and would play at about 2 to 5 players. The game is Concordia, my number 93, and I don't know. I liked this game all right when I played it. And then I played it again, and I liked it more. And when I look at the number of people that have rated this highly, and the fact that it's sort of been a slow burn climb up the Board Game Geek Top 100 rankings, I can't help but wonder if this would be the kind of game that could shoot into my top 50 or even my top 25 if I just kept playing it. It sticks with me in a way that games this far down my list usually don't. I think about Concordia, I think more than a lot of these other games, at least of the ones that I don't own. So, yeah, I think the only thing that's really missing is if this had a solid solo mode, it might be enough to get me to chase it down and purchase it. But it doesn't seem to be available, from what I understand at least. And I don't know. I'm speculating, but I like it. I did like it more the second time. I'm wondering if that would hold true for the third, the fourth, the fifth times. I just got to play this one again. I just haven't had a chance to with COVID, so unfortunately, I'm not planning on playing it anytime in the immediate future, but I really would like to. It's a card-driven game where you start with a hand of cards and you use them to build locations around and trade resources, and you get better cards which give you points based on having certain things done in the game, so that sort of incentivizes you to do certain things. And it's one of those games that just sort of really builds on itself, so the further you go, the more momentum you build, the more dramatic the things you can do. So I always like that style of game. I just wonder how much I could like it if I played it a few more times. That's all. So this is Concordia. It sits at number 93 for now. Who knows? If I'm doing this time next year, it could definitely rise. That's Concordia, my number 93. My number 92 is Wits and Wagers, which is down 18 spots. Its weight is a 1, and it can play between 3 and I would say 21 players using teams. Wits and Wagers is a trivia game. I do not like trivia games. I don't know that many things, so I'm not very good at them. Plus, there's no challenge to it. You either know it or you don't. So what game is there other than finding out essentially whether or not you've been predetermined to win based on the cards and whether they correspond to areas of knowledge that you actually have? This is avoided in Wits and Wagers because all the answers are numbers, and you can win by getting close rather than knowing the exact number. So, for instance, if you're supposed to guess how tall the Oscar statues are for the Academy Awards, and you have 3 guesses. One's 11, one's 15, and one's 20. Okay. Well, you can, even if you put 20, you can say, actually, I think we went too high. And then bet your chips on a different answer. So you could bet them all on 11 instead. Or you could split them between 11 and 15, and you figure, it's got to be under 20, so it's going to be one of those. Because you want to get the answer that is the closest without going over. So when you find out it's actually 14 inches, all the people who bet on 11, which might not include the people who actually guessed 11, all of those people get money. And that money can be reinvested on bets on future rounds, or you can stockpile it in hopes of having more money than anyone else at the end of the game. That's essentially the game. You just go through 7 rounds, meaning 7 questions, you guess 7 times. You get a bonus, at least the way I play it. If you are the answer that is the closest without going over, even if you don't bet on yourself at all, you still get a small money bonus for doing so. And you just see who has the most money at the end of 7 rounds. It's fun, it's over quick, it's really, in some ways, an ideal party game. I think the only thing that bothers me is that there is no intrinsic variety to the game. You are always guessing numbers-based trivia, and that's all you do from the beginning of the game to the end, and then trying to decide which numbers are going to be the best payoff, because the more to the fringes the guesses are, so if you have that Oscar guess and you've got 8, 9, 11, 15, 17, 19, 20, the 8 and the 20 are going to pay off the most because they're most to the fringes of the medium of where the guesses were. The closer the medium, the less the payoff is. So if you're averaging around the right area, you just don't get as much of the payoff as you would for betting on extremes. So that's the game. It's very good. I would recommend it for just about anyone. I don't know if this is the game that will get anyone into playing board games by itself, because it doesn't really bridge into the kind of mechanisms that other board games use. It is essentially just a really streamlined party game, which there's nothing wrong with. But it doesn't really work as kind of like, if you like this, then you can potentially enjoy this game that's like this other one, but a little bit more complicated. You can't really do that with Wits and Wagers. So its uses for trying to get other people into playing board games are limited, but sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just need a game that works with a large group of people, that you aren't going to have a bunch of people asking you rules clarification questions for the next 2 hours. If you're looking for that, Wits and Wagers is tremendous. I would highly recommend it. That's my number 92, Wits and Wagers. Rounding out my 10 this time is my number 91, Sentient, which is down 12 spots. Its weight is a 3, and it plays 2 to 4 players. This is a game that is a little sprinkling of a few different mechanisms. It has a little bit of auctioning in it. It has a little bit of dice manipulation. It has a little bit of combo management, as you might expect from this list. It's a lot of little good things that plays in about half an hour to maybe 45 minutes. It works just as well at 2, 3, or 4 players. And I would say that the only thing it's really missing is some connection to the theme, which is pretty weak. It's about robots, apparently. And because apparently robots like manipulating dice, this is a thing, supposedly. It has some nice artwork, but it uses the same artwork over and over again, unfortunately, so you don't get to see a lot of different cool images of the different types of robots. You only see one piece of art for the 5 different types of robots in the whole deck, which is a little disappointing. It has some cool looking dice. The dice are just there to be rolled once per round and then manipulated. Depending on certain numbers and number combinations, they will make cards be worth points, and you're trying to bank as many points as possible. And then you're also at the same time trying to bid for certain things. It's a cool pile of mechanisms. It's not overly complicated. You could play this with someone who is new to gaming, and they might have a good time, assuming they are not going to need you to really take things slowly, because some people do and some people don't. It's not a gateway game for everyone, but it is, I think, a good gateway game for some. I think, despite what I have to say about the theme, it is going to draw some people in, because it is kind of a cool theme of, like, robots gaining sentience. But you're really only going to get that from, like, a line or two of flavor text, if there is any, even in the manual, and that would be about it. There's very little connection to that theme and the mechanisms. Very cool game, very light, not extremely light, but light. And definitely something I think is under the radar enough that it should get checked out more. If you haven't heard of it, next time you have an opportunity to play it, you see it at, say, a board game cafe or something like that, give it a try. I think you will be pleasantly surprised by the amount of game that's in there, for the number of rules that are actually involved, and the amount of time that it actually takes. So that's my number 91, Sentient. There you go. So that was my numbers 91 through 100 of my top 100 list, plus my honorable mention, Can't Stop. Let me know what you think. Please add a comment in the comments, and if you want to see more videos of this, they will be coming, and if you want to see me do more videos of other things, that may be in the works as well. So thank you for checking it out this time, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.